670 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 22 minutes before 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Monday morning. It is time for News Bites. This is the segment of the morning show that we dedicate to the news. We take as many stories as we can possibly fit in a 22-minute period, and we abbreviate them, we shorten them, we get to the point, cut to the chase, and give you a chance to hear as many news stories as possible from around the world, around the state, around the nation, and around town. Like I said, in backwards order, but anyway. And remember, if you'd like to advertise on this or any show on WOC, give us a call at 732-8000. We'll be glad to oblige whatever your request is, even reading the ad live on some of the live segments on this station. Visit us at the Paddock Mall. We are right outside of the food court. Sit with a sales executive, and he or she will explain to you how teaming up with us will help us allow your customers to know about you and go through your doors.
Yes.
I stumbled through that one. All right, let's see. These are the news. The first one, and we'll give you the information so you can look up these stories on your own and read more. In other words, the news agency we got them from. The first one is from the Associated Press. More than half of the country could receive snow this week, starting today, as storm systems pose a triple threat of winter weather. This almost sounds like an old story, like from a couple weeks ago, but apparently it's happening again. The East Coast could expect snow from Boston to Washington, D.C. today, with as much as 8 inches of snow falling this morning and into early afternoon. Rain is changing to snow from Philadelphia to New York City as we speak, and D.C. will change to snow later this morning. Forecasters predict between 5 to 8 inches of snow for New York City and Philadelphia, with smaller snowfall totals expected for Baltimore, expected to get between 3 and 4 inches, Washington, D.C. up to 2 inches, and Boston up to an inch. A second storm developing in the Rockies could also dump 5 to 10 inches of snow from Colorado to Iowa by Tuesday, by tomorrow, striking the East Coast one day later with another dose of winter weather. This time, heavier snow will be inland in the northeast, with rain, sleet, and snow along the coast from Washington, D.C. to Boston. So another, and of course, it probably won't affect us weather-wise, but it will affect us if you're visiting or somebody is visiting you, and then they need to get back. So.
Yeah. Florida National Guard officials say that budget cuts are being considered by the United States Army would cut around 10% of the Florida Guard's total force. Florida Guard leaders say the state already lags the National Guard funding $467 million in 2012. A Florida Guard spokesperson says that the state already has the lowest in the nation of guardsmen to citizen ratio. According to the Florida Guard, the Army is proposing cutting Army National Guard forces around the nation from its current 350,000 to about 315,000 in fiscal 2015, which begins October the 1st. The proposal comes as the Army is considering a reduction of its force by 100,000 by 2019, down to 420,000, according to a recent report. Florida Guard officials say Florida has the most natural disasters and most high-value targets, from Disney World to nuclear power plants, and want the cuts to be thoughtful to the state. The Florida Guard also fears the Army plans would lead to the loss of part of Florida's fleet of about 30 helicopters, reported by the Florida News Network.
And the next story is from the Associated Press. The cause of Philip Seymour Hoffman's death is expected to be announced today, one day after the Oscar-winning actor was found inside his New York apartment dead. Hoffman was 46 years old. Police sources say Hoffman was found unconscious at around 11:15 a.m. yesterday on the bathroom floor of his apartment by a friend who is screenwriter David Barr Katz, who called 911. Hoffman was pronounced dead at the scene. He was supposed to pick up his 3 children yesterday, but never showed up. He was last seen 8 p.m. Saturday night. While the cause of death has not yet been determined, a law enforcement official told ABC News that heroin was found at the scene with a hypodermic needle seen sticking out of Hoffman's arm. The New York City Police Department is continuing to investigate.
For many people, starting your own business is the embodiment of the American dream. You get to be your own boss, build something from the ground up, and revel in its success. But for some budding entrepreneurs in several states, their small businesses have become big financial nightmares, and not because of the economy. Rather, the federal government has forced them to go cash only in an electronic economy, despite the fact they sell a legal product in some states, marijuana. According to the federal government, however, it's still illegal. If you own a business selling marijuana in a state where it's legal, even if it is for medical use, you will have trouble getting a bank loan, accepting credit cards, or getting one for your business, claiming any business expenses on your taxes, or even running your proceeds and expenses through many bank accounts, reported by ABC.
And this also from ABC News. A convicted quadruple murderer is on the loose this morning after escaping from custody in Michigan and abducting a woman, according to corrections officials in a statement issued to ABC News. Officials say Michael David Elliott escaped from the Ionia Correctional Facility yesterday, possibly through a hole in a fence, before obtaining a car and driving to Indiana. Elliott abducted a woman with a knife or a box cutter before driving with her to Elkhart, Indiana, about 130 miles south, where they stopped for gasoline. Michigan Department of Corrections spokesman Russ Marion said, while the woman was able to escape, Elliott remains at large. Marion told ABC News that a hole was discovered in a fence on the grounds of the Ionia Correctional Facility. Michigan State Police Lieutenant Troy Allen said officials are looking for the woman's red 2004 Jeep Liberty 4-door with license plate number 5FTG55. Officials plan on meeting with the woman to find out more information about the incident.
The Democratic National Committee used the Super Bowl as an opportunity to release a football-themed attack ad on New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and the George Washington Bridge Lane closure fiasco. It's latest in a spate of online spots based on the scandal. The online ad posted to YouTube begins with the statement, "The big game is about to begin. A rising star shows promise," overlaid on images of a white uniformed quarterback approaching an offensive line already poised at the line of scrimmage. The ad quickly pivots to a shot of Christie triumphantly telling supporters during an Election Day 2013 victory speech, maybe the folks in D.C. should tune in their TVs right now and see how it's done, reported by Fox News.
And this story is from the Reuters news agency. Oregon voters will likely face two questions about gay marriage when they go to the ballot this year: whether to become the 18th state to let same-sex couples get married, and whether the state should be the first to allow florists, cake makers, and others to refuse to participate in these weddings on religious grounds. The ballot initiatives set up what some activists say have said is the next frontier in the marriage debate. As more states move to extend marriage rights to same-sex couples, those who object on religious grounds want a legal right to opt out. This is not a sideshow issue, said James Essex of the American Civil Liberties Union, referring to the Oregon ballot initiative and the coming debate over religious exemption. This is going to be the issue that we fight about for the next 10 years, at least in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights movement, unquote. The story is from Reuters. U.S.
Secretary of State John Kerry recently threatened Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas that he would meet the same fate as his predecessor, Yasser Arafat, if he turned down Washington's proposals for peace with Israel. A Palestinian source was quoted yesterday as saying, Jamal Muhassin, a senior Fatah official in the West Bank, said that if the report about Kerry's threat to Abbas is true, this shows that Israel assassinated Yasser Arafat after receiving a green light from the U.S. administration. Kerry should not hold the Palestinians responsible for his failure with the Israelis, the Fatah official added, reported by the Jerusalem Post.
And this is a story that almost defies belief. It's from the Associated Press. A man left Mexico in December of 2012 for a day of shark fishing. He ended up surviving 13 months on fish, birds, and turtles before washing ashore on the remote Marshall Islands 5,500 miles away. But that's the story. A man identifying himself as 37-year-old Jose Salvador Alvarenga told the U.S. ambassador in the Marshall Islands and the nation's officials during a 30-minute meeting this morning before he was taken to a local hospital for monitoring. Alvarenga washed ashore on the tiny atoll of Iban in the Pacific Ocean last week before being taken to the capital of Majuro. "It's hard for me to imagine someone surviving 13 months at sea," is a quote from Ambassador Tom Armbruster in Majuro, but it's also hard to imagine how someone might arrive on Iban out of the blue. Certainly this guy has had an ordeal and has been at sea for some time. Other officials were reacting cautiously to the Spanish-speaking man's story while they tried to piece together more information. If true, the man's ordeal would rank among the greatest tales ever of survival at sea. Armbruster said the soft-spoken man complained of joint pain this morning and had a limp, but was able to walk. He had long hair and a beard, the ambassador said, and rather than appearing emaciated, he looked puffy in places, including around his ankles. Otherwise, he added, Alvarenga seemed in reasonable health. Armbruster, who speaks Spanish, said the survivor told the following story, and then it goes on to pretty much recap what I just read to you. Wow, go look that one up. That's a long story, but I think he had somebody else on the boat with him when he started out,
Wow.
and I think the other person died. I don't see that in front of me, but I think I heard that elsewhere.
Mary Musselman, age 81, did not listen to reprimands from wildlife officials from Florida, and now she is behind bars without bond. Neighbors in Musselman's Sebring, Florida community are outraged because her husband is dying of cancer, and she is his only caregiver. However, authorities say they warned her multiple times not to feed the black bears coming onto her property. Wildlife officer says that she did it anyway and fed them up to 17 to 18 bowls of dog food at a time. Tampa area news stations report the woman thought the bears would starve without her. Wildlife officers say they went to great lengths to educate her on why she should not feed the bears. They brought her informational videos and pamphlets and had conversations with her. The Fish and Wildlife Commission spokesman Gary Morse says that feeding bears results in bears losing their fear of people. According to Morris, after they get used to living around humans and getting food from them, relocating them does not solve the problem. And when bears come too close to people, they do damage to property and to people. A judge sent Wildlife Commission officers to arrest Musselman. They said she found them and told them she'd kill them. Now she is charged not only with feeding wildlife, but also with battery against the law officer and violating her probation, reported by Florida News Network.
Wow.
How about that?
From the Associated Press, a homeless man was repeatedly bitten and clawed by a mountain lion at a Southern California encampment, but was expected to survive, according to state game wardens in a statement issued yesterday. The unidentified man, believed to be in his 50s, was camping near State Route 74 west of Perris late Saturday when he was mauled, according to the California Department of Fish and Game. Game Lieutenant Patrick Foy said that Riverside Press Enterprise, or rather told reporters with the Riverside Press Enterprise newspaper, that the man didn't know what attacked him, but puncture wounds, bite marks, and cuts to his body indicate he was mauled by a big cat. We are 99% sure that it was a lion, said Foy. The conclusion is based solely on the victim's injuries and the extent of those injuries.
The president of Afghanistan has not spoken to his American counterpart since June, he said in an interview which showed the increasing gulf between Kabul and Washington. Hamad Karzai, age 56, has grown increasingly hostile towards Barack Obama as Afghanistan prepares to elect a new president in April. Mr. Karzai will not stand again, but he is determined to emphasize his disagreements with the United States before he steps down. This is a quote, "This whole 12 years was one of constant pleading with America to treat the lives of our civilians as lives of people." He was quoted as saying, added that he had not spoken to Mr. Obama since June. "We met in South Africa at Mandela's funeral, but did not speak. Letters have been exchanged," according to the Telegraph.
And from the Washington Times, Representative Paul Ryan from Wisconsin said yesterday that because there is no time limit on immigration reform like there would be on a government shutdown, Republicans will not be forced to compromise with the Senate on a deal that the Republican doesn't agree with. Here are our standards, he says. This is our approach. If you want to do it this way, this is what we want to do, he said yesterday on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But we don't think we can allow this border to continue to be overrun. And if we can get security first, no amnesty before anything happens, we think that's a good approach, unquote. Mr. Ryan emphasized that securing the border is a crucial first step before anything is changed in terms of legal residency or a path to citizenship. And again, I'm getting that from the Washington Times.
Turning 30 used to mean hitting your stride as an official adult, but for many of the country's millennials, it feels like being stuck in a perpetual late adolescence. Marriage eludes many, children not anytime soon. Most millennials have some sort of job, but for many a career seems unobtainable. A home of their own, lots of them have had to move back in with mom and dad or shack up with roommates. That's not the place where many millennials expected or wanted to be as they enter their 30s, reported by MSNBC.
And the next story is from UPI News. An Israeli lawmaker tried to explain yesterday that his characterization of U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry as anti-Semitic was not personal. Kerry is not here to reach a compromise. He wants to decrease the Jewish presence in the land of Israel and create a Palestinian state, the Jerusalem Post reported. Knesset member Moti Yogev told Israel Radio. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is acting under Kerry's obsessive pressure, which may have anti-Semitic undertones, Yogi said. After a demand from U.S. Ambassador Dan Shapiro for an apology, Yogev wrote... Is it Yogev or Yogi? It's two ways here. Wrote Shapiro a letter saying the expression possibly was inappropriate.
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement is now tasked with reviewing thousands of criminal cases in Florida after they say a chemist with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement stole prescription pain pills from an evidence room and swapped them out with over-the-counter pills. FDLE Commissioner Gerald Bailey says that the chemist works in FDLE's Pensacola Regional Crime Laboratory and handled nearly 2,600 cases from 35 counties since he was hired in 2006. It's not clear how many cases have been comprised, but Bailey says it could be drug charges will have to be dropped and prisoners released if it's determined that the chemist tampered with the evidence. The chemist is on paid leave while a criminal investigation continues. Bailey says the chemist will be fired if charges are brought against him, reported by the Florida News Network.
And from the BBC, Syrian government forces have killed dozens of civilians in air raids in the northern city of Aleppo, according to the broadcasting company. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says about 90 people, most of them civilians, died when helicopters dropped barrel bombs on Saturday. Aleppo has been the focus of bitter fighting between President Bashar al-Assad's forces and rebels. Meanwhile, militants linked to al-Qaeda are reported to have killed the leader of a rival Islamist militia there. Fighters from the Islamic State of the Iraq and the Levant killed Adnan Bakur during a raid on the base of rivals. The Tawhid Brigades, according to SOHR, which is the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, according to the BBC. The SOHR, by the way, is a United Kingdom-based group that monitors the conflict.
British nuclear experts are being lined up to help decommission the damaged Fukushima power plant in a move that could reboot Japan's atomic power capabilities. Lady Judge, the British-American nuclear expert and advisor at Fukushima, is organizing for engineers from Sellafield in Cumbria to travel to Japan to advise on decontaminating and shutting down the stricken site. This is a quote from Lady Judge. At Sellafield and Downrier, we are decommissioning big power plants, and we can provide a very good example to the Japanese of how to do it safely. I've been talking to Sellafield about sending some engineers to help, reported by The Telegraph.
And from ABC News, Joe Namath's fur coat is the talk of Twitter. Those who are not familiar with Joe Namath's flamboyant past and style were mesmerized with the fancy fur coat that the NFL legend wore yesterday to the Super Bowl, where he participated in the pregame coin toss. As a New York Jet, Joe Namath was tough enough to guarantee a win before Super Bowl III and deliver it. He also wasn't afraid to pose in an advertisement wearing women's pantyhose. At 70 years old, Joe Namath is clearly still living up to his Broadway Joe nickname. While his swagger was appreciated by many, Namath's fur coat did draw some Twitter scorn. Among them was this remark: "I'm not a big PETA guy, but I don't agree with what Joe Namath did to Lassie." Another one said, "Really, Joe Namath, that fur coat doesn't suit you. You know who it would look great on? The animals who wore it first." And then Joe Namath rebutted on his own Twitter side. He said, "First, you complained when I wore pantyhose. You folks are not easy to please."
He's a cool guy. Representative Paul Ryan said yesterday that he does not expect the Pope to agree with him about the role of government in addressing social mobility, but he does welcome Pope Francis's contribution to the United States debate on wealth and poverty. Ryan, a Catholic, has for several years written the House Republican budget proposals, which he says will ensure the long-term viability of the social safety net. He does not, however, expect the Pope to endorse his specific policies. Many Democrats see Francis as aligned with them on social and economic issues, especially in his criticism of trickle-down economics and his characterization of an impersonal economy, reported by CNN.
And this story from the Associated Press: religious leaders of multiple faiths and farmers in Nevada and Utah turned to prayer this weekend to help easing severe drought conditions gripping the West. The plea to God comes weeks after the federal government declared parts of 11 parched western and central states natural disaster areas. Faith leaders asked for divine intervention during a special multi-faith service on Saturday at a Mormon church in the Reno suburb of Sparks. And yesterday, the Utah Farm Bureau Federation asked the public to join in prayer and fasting for snow and rain for livestock and crops as part of its Harvesting Faith event. A quote from Ron Gibson, who's a dairy farmer in Weber County, Utah, says, "We can't go to the legislature to ask for help, so we decided to go to the guy upstairs. One thing you learn as a farmer is most of the things that happen in your life are totally out of your control," unquote.
White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonald defended the administration's foreign policy in Syria and Iran and outlined the next steps for the Keystone XL pipeline in a wide-ranging interview yesterday morning. In Syria, just 4% of the chemical weapons stockpile has been destroyed, according to United States estimates, which drew condemnation from U.S. Ambassador Robert Mikulak. McDonald said the deal is not falling apart. The United States would like to see it proceed much more quickly than it is, he said, and pledged to keep pushing the issue. But he said it was still important that the Syrian government had even acknowledged having a chemical weapon stockpile and having to have it dismantled, reported by CBS.
All right, that's all the time we have for News Bites. Remember, we do this each weekday morning from about 8:35 or so until 9 o'clock. We take the news and we shrink it down so you can get as many stories in a small period of time as possible. If you have a business and you'd like us to help you get some more customers, why don't you visit us here at the Paddock Mall, sit with one of our sales executives, and he or she will explain how it's done. You can have your ad read live during this segment. We wouldn't mind doing that for you. Or have it recorded and played anytime during the day. WOCA is a 24-hour station. Robin, how many stories did we get today?
23.
23, not bad. We'll take a little break and we'll be right back.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.